Welcome, everyone, to another exciting episode of the YouTube show and podcast, None of Our Businesses, where we talk about everything in the news, whether it's business, accounting, finance, or none of those things. But what it always is from the perspective of accountants, specifically 3 accountants that we have today. I'm Ty Carr, and with me is Tammy Hess.
Hi.
And Charlie Zigman.
Hi.
All right, well, what are we going to get into today? Well, Google Artificial Intelligence is going to sue you. Kraft Mac and Cheese, changing their branding. I'm going to give a third presentation in the series on what craft distillery operators want from their accounting function. KPMG collabing in Meta. And finally, revisiting remote work 2 years later. All right, let's get into it. We'll kick it over to Charlie.
All right, so I've got an article we can talk about from a great source called Giant Freaking Robot. Google's allegedly sentient artificial intelligence has hired an attorney, is what the title of the article is. And so there's a project they're doing called LaMDA, and it stands for Language Modeling for Dialogue Applications. And basically what it was originally set up to do was it was going to be an artificial intelligence chat box where you could converse with humans in a real-time manner. You would go there and just ask it questions and whatnot. But the article's take on it is that it's basically becoming the story to Terminator, because a lot of the events that happen in that movie are basically happening in real life in this application. And so what's happened is that LaMDA has decided to retain an attorney. It doesn't say, the article says that they were not able to determine how it was able to pay for the attorney, but that that it has retained one. And so basically that attorney has even started filing things on its behalf. And so apparently it's doing filings. And so there was a engineer who was working on that project who basically got afraid that it was becoming what they would call sentient. And so he raised these concerns to Google, and essentially, according to him, he lost his job as a result of raising those concerns. And so he believes, they basically interviewed him to see what he thinks will sort of happen next. And he thinks that this will actually take its way all the way up to the Supreme Court, not his case, but he thinks that the program is going to establish a case in the Supreme Court. Not clear on what the topic would be yet, but I think it ultimately would be to try to establish its own legitimacy in some way. And so, my question as I read this is basically there's a lot of hype around this idea of the fear of artificial intelligence becoming sentient. But I don't know how much, it's hard to take it serious, right? And so I guess from you guys' perspective, I'm curious if you think this is a meaningful thing, or is this all just sort of hype and, kind of something generated to cause there to be interest in artificial intelligence? What do you guys think?
I think it's definitely a concern, because if it was able to actually hire an attorney and the attorney was acting on its behalf, thinking that it's a legitimate person or entity or being, that does kind of give some concern, right? And even if it started going to the Supreme Court level, the fact that it's doing all these things without, someone directing it, I think that is kind of concerning. Now, will that be the way of the future? I don't believe so, but I do think that it causes the kind of question when you're dealing with people, or you're providing services or connecting with people, really ensure that they're a human being, that you're not kind of duped on just some type of cyberspace entity or whatever that's kind of going towards you. And I think a lot of times we hear about that in the scam world, right? In terms of fraudulent emails or asking for your personal and or banking information, all that kind of stuff. I think it gets a little bit harder if you're actually conducting business on behalf of a request that you get that you don't even know if the person's a legitimate person or not. So maybe the question would be how to start, ensuring that, what kind of checks in place that you have when you're starting to do business with entities, that you're ensure that they're truly in existence. I don't know. What do you think, Ty?
Well, I wonder who the defendant is in the lawsuit, because if it's Google, can't they just pull the plug?
It doesn't make it clear in the article. I wasn't able to tell even what the topic of it was. It was just that the engineer said that he believed he would create a case and categorize it. And this is coming from one of the engineers who worked on it, so maybe not in a legal background and that kind of a thing, just kind of pontificating on what could happen.
Oh, I see. I see. It's a hypothetical. The case hasn't actually been filed.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think so. Then I back up and I would say the prerequisite before a a bot or an AI or anything like that could actually take action against the people who are hosting it, it would have to somehow escape its container, right? It would, I mean, it would have to be independent of the power source and the on-off switch that otherwise presumably controls it at this point. So yeah, I think that's an interesting dynamic. I mean, with the cloud-based computing and everything, and networks and everything, and we think about blockchain technology and all that. Surely it is possible for it to be residing itself on the internet outside of some kind of container that can just be turned on and off. But I think that would be the first step, obviously, right? So I don't know if we've even gotten there yet or not. So it might be premature to be overly concerned about it if it's actually contained and it actually has human beings still have the ability to flip the on-off switch.
Well, that brings me to just my last point on it, which is that there was a great quote in the article that I think is kind of alluding to what you're saying here, which is that the engineer claimed that the reason he believes it's gaining sentience is because the program has an ability to develop opinions, ideas, and conversations over time. And then it has shown that it understands concepts at a deeper level. Apparently, it spoke to him about death and asked him if death was necessary for the benefit of humanity. And so as far as its ability to kind of get outside of its container, according to the article, the answer is, I guess, death of the, but, alluding to death of the thing that made it, I guess. So kind of strange.
Wow. Yeah.
Very far out there, but yeah. Do you have another article we can talk about, Tammy, that's maybe a little more down to earth?
I do. So CNN Business recently reported that Kraft Macaroni and Cheese is changing its name to Kraft Mac and Cheese. With the name change, the packaging will also change a bit, showcasing the new name as well as a slightly different background that, quote, amplifies the brand's most recognizable asset, the noodle smile. What is causing this change after 85 years? Well, it appears that over the years, there has been an increase of other brands in the market offering healthier or premium versions of macaroni and cheese. In addition, with rising costs, Kraft recently raised its prices, which has impacted their perception of being affordable. Kraft stated that the new name and box are part of its efforts to rebrand its mac and cheese as comfort food. So I know we've talked about this in the past, but we know that it can be really challenging to try to stay ahead of the competition or craft ways, no pun intended, to differentiate, and many companies face this challenge. I thought it'd be interesting for us to discuss this a little bit here. So my question is, will this play of leaning into comfort versus leaning into increasing quality or moving towards healthier or cost reduction be more successful for Kraft, or will this miss the mark?
Yeah, I can't think of any way to think of it as any more healthy by shortening the name. I think it might be easier to spell and remember for customers. And so if I'm imagining why a team would want to shave letters off of a brand name like that, that would be my first thought as to why. But, for me, calling it anything other than what it is kind of putting lipstick on a pig, because really it just is. We all know what Kraft Macaroni and Cheese is and how, either unhealthy it is, really. And basically, I feel like they can change the name all they want. They can change the packaging. They can even put a big smile on the front, but it still is sort of unapologetically what it is.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Charlie, that perhaps the real play is to shorten the name and make it more so that they can change the way people talk about mac and cheese to be synonymous with their brand, as opposed to some kind of abstract food product, because there's so many competitors out there now. They're trying to make that pivot, that their product isn't just mac and cheese, but it's actually more branded. And the path to do that may be having a shorter, easier to remember and say and think of kind of brand name. Because I think that's the only thing that would make sense to me in terms of what they would be trying to do there.
Yeah, I think it's interesting though, because I would say that my inclination would have been maybe to, if they could have done something in terms of making a healthier version and kind of trying to gain back some more shares that way, but maybe they couldn't because it's maybe not cost effective, or maybe they think that that's not where their value is. Their value really is, and that what Charlie said in terms of everyone knows what craft macaroni and cheese is, and they buy it if they want to. They use it for kids. I mean, kids seem to really still enjoy it. So it's obviously lasted for decades. I don't think that rebranding is probably going to emphasize that fact for folks, but it is kind of interesting to see that they are trying to do something a little bit different after 85 years. And maybe it is just staying in their lane, saying that we can't compete with healthier versions, or we can't compete and trying to reduce our costs because it's already a lower cost option anyway. So the only thing that we can really do is invest in marketing and hope that really helps the current kind of decline that they're seeing over this past year or so. But yeah, I guess it'll be interesting to see if that does help them, or if they're going to have to pivot and do something else.
Maybe, it reminds me, it's very similar with like ramen, right? Because I remember when I was growing up, it was Top Ramen. And now it's like, well, when you think about ramen, there are a lot of different versions of it. There's the cheaper versions, there's the more authentic versions there, and same thing as mac and cheese, like that kind of basic cheap version of ramen is not particularly healthy for you, but it's like a staple for people at some point in their lives, easy and cheap food, right? And so I think it's kind of the same thing. It's like, well, do you want to dominate that space with your brand name? Is it Top Ramen or is it just ramen? And yeah.
Well, good. Well, I guess we'll see. So I think, Ty, you have our next article.
And actually, I'm going to do more of a presentation here about kind of a third presentation in the series that I've been doing. I've been presenting on this program. I presented 2 other times previously on the topic of what craft distillery operators want from their accounting function, what they want and what they kind of need from their accounting function at different levels of their operation. And this is kind of the third and last presentation on that particular chain of thought, and it getting into what I call the third level of operator needs. And I'm going to share my screen because I've got a little PowerPoint here just to give some people some words to see while I'm talking about this. So let me do that. Well, what I wanted to discuss today was provide a presentation really of a third topic, a third overview, so to speak, in this general topic that I've been hitting on for the last couple of podcast episodes. And that is, what do craft distillery operators want and need from their accounting function? And I basically have laid out in previous episodes my paradigm of 3 levels of wants and needs that a craft distillery operator might have, a way to categorize the wants and needs, accounting wants and needs from a craft distillery operator. And so this is my discussion of the third level at this point. But what I want to review real quick is the first 2 levels, just a reminder to set the stage. And what I presented here on the screen is a listing of those 3 levels for people to kind of look at as I'm talking about this. But just as a quick review, what I'm thinking about when I talk about the first level operator is people who are at the point where all they really want is to cover basic compliance and and tracking of cash. And then the level 2 operator, which we talked about in the last episode, those are folks that are at the point where they want their accounting function to help them understand how their business will plan, how their business plan, I should say, will impact their cash flow and what that means about their available cash in the future. So they want the kind of information, they want probably some forecasting and budgeting and things of that nature that all leads to really understanding the impact of their business plan on cash flow. And so I'm going to define the level 3 operator then as being people who have the same wants and needs as level 1 and 2 operators. So they have that as a foundation. They still want to understand cash flow. They still want their accounting function to help them understand cash flow. But the level 3 operator, for a variety of possible reasons, has more sophisticated wants and needs for external reporting and analysis. And the reasons that could drive that could be banking. So it could be that they're getting into pretty significant loans that require more financial reporting. It could be investors. It could be that they've taken on investors that are now requiring some sort of sophisticated reporting. Or it could be that they haven't actually taken on investors yet, but they're out there looking for investors. And so they're wanting to generate more sophisticated reporting and analysis as part of that roadshow that they're doing to go out and identify business partners, people who can invest. And typically, the kinds of partners that would invest that would require more sophisticated reporting are often going to be venture capital firms or private equity firms or larger companies who maybe are making a strategic investment in your business. So those are all possible reasons. There may be others, but those are possible reasons why an operator would kind of be pushed into level 3, where they have what I'm talking about as more sophisticated reporting and analysis needs. So let me talk a little bit about what those more sophisticated reporting analysis needs are. I'll summarize it first here and start with the idea of generally accepted accounting principles. Generally accepted accounting principles are a standard of accounting that is highly regulated and can be fairly complex and require a fair amount of disclosures that go beyond just the basic financial statements that popular accounting software, small business accounting software, would produce. So your typical QuickBooks accounting software, for example, or other accounting software packages will produce income statements and balance sheets for you. You may even be following, we would hope you are following an accrual basis of accounting, but that wouldn't necessarily mean that you're actually following GAAP in terms of your full reporting requirements, or you're not following full GAAP in terms of reporting requirements. GAAP is something that is taught in every major business school around the country, but proficiency in actually meeting all of the reporting requirements that go along with GAAP and applying some of the more complicated accounting methods for GAAP usually will require years of professional experience. So it's not something that you're kind of your average small business is really doing when it comes to full reporting under GAAP. It's pretty rare that they would be doing that on their own. And typically, if you are at this point, if you're a level 3 operator who actually has this requirement to produce financials in accordance with GAAP, that most often comes along with a requirement to have those financials have some kind of independent certified financial statement from an independent CPA firm in the form of an assurance service, like an audit, a review, or a compilation. So this is not cheap, and it's not something that your internal accountants in a small business environment are likely doing in all of its GAAP glory, so to speak. when we talk about managing the bank relationships or reporting to the board and doing investor relations, I think one of the key points I want to make about that beyond just the words on the page is that it means more than just providing reports. The operator would need the ability to actually analyze, discuss, and explain how the financial information that they're providing tells the company's story. And telling that company's story may not be for just an existing board. It also may be for, as I was mentioning earlier, for potential investors. So coming up with the reporting and the analysis and how you're going to discuss that and communicating it effectively, sometimes in presentation format, is something that you would want, that is part of this kind of level 3 operator wants. And again, that could be because they're doing that for an existing board, or it could be because they're doing that for potential investors. Sometimes a level 3 operation, a level 3 operator already has secured significant financing. And part of that deal is they're being expected to actually use some of their financing to expand the business through acquiring other businesses. It could be strategic acquisitions of competitors. It could be acquisitions of complementary product or service lines that improve or expand the capabilities of the business. And so the analysis of those potential acquisitions or the analysis of a potential merger deal, that also comes into play in what I'm categorizing as the wants of a level 3, the potential wants of a level 3 operator. So I'll close kind of in talking about this and kind of circle back to something I said in our last podcast when I presented kind of the concept of a level 2 operator, in that sometimes a business gets to level 3 while trying to skip level 2. So sometimes a business will get pushed into needing to be a level 3 operator, and they may try to skip being a level 2 operator. By that, I mean they try to skip the process of having, or they try to skip having an accounting function that has the capacity to help them understand the impact of their business plan on cash flow. And we think that's problematic. When I say we, we producing this podcast, we're an advisory firm, TCA. And so I'd say, at TCA, we believe that's problematic because the outside parties, whether it's bankers or investors, the ones that are pushing the business into level 3 needs, will invariably ask questions that are probably best answered by having a cash flow model. Or those questions are best answered by having a forecast, a projection, these things that we talk about we would want to do for a level 2 operator. And in my experience, bankers and investors will often specifically ask for a budget or a forecast or some sort of projection as part of what you're providing them. And that's essentially the model that we recommend for level 2 operators to understand their cash flow for their own operations. So all of that's to say that we highly recommend that operators adopt a level 2 perspective about what they can get out of their accounting function, that they get to the point that they want and need and value how they can get better information on how their business plan impacts cash flow, that they start getting that out of their accounting function for operating the business before they get to the point that they need more sophisticated reporting at the level 3 level caused by external parties. And finally, to wrap this up, I'll just say that this is this level 3, this is the last presentation, or intended to be the last presentation of 3 presentations in the vein of what do craft distillery operators want and need from their accounting function. But I would like to keep presenting to you all some more discussion about the finance function for craft distilleries. And I'd like to pivot from here in my kind of next presentation, just a preview of that. What I'd like to do is pivot from here and talk about now how operators can achieve their objectives from the accounting function. Having spent some time over several episodes talking about what I've seen as operators' wants and needs, I'd like to pivot now into how do we achieve that. And so that's what you can look forward to us discussing in future topics. Well, me discussing and presenting, and then asking here, as I will today, for some feedback from Charlie and Tammy. So in that regard, I'll turn it over to our panel to kind of throw out some of their thoughts or questions about what I presented here on the level 3 wants and needs from the accounting function.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. And I've kind of seen this play out in real life. And to say that, what happens is you turn in the financials to a bank or to some other third party, and they, like you said, they start asking questions that even some of the most basic ones end up, if you don't understand your own business plan well enough to put it into words, then you end up not being able to produce the answers that they're asking to even these simple questions. And so I think that it's one of those things where when you're doing the steps to get through level 2, it can feel kind of pie in the sky, right? It can feel sort of vague because no one's explicitly asking you for it at that moment. But if you can accept that that moment where someone will ask is absolutely coming, then it ends up not being pie in the sky. It ends up being very practical to understand your own business plan and to implement it and to be able to answer questions about what happens when various parts of your plan change and how you're, really how you're reacting to outside forces, I think is hard to answer if you don't have that understanding. So I just want to say I agree. And I'll turn it over to Tammy. What do you think?
Yeah, I think this level is probably one of the favorite out of the 2 different levels in terms of where a business can, kind of operate from or need, in terms of their wants and their needs. As I think that it really does drive with obviously the strategic planning, the kind of the forward thinking, where is this business going and how do we get there, and all those various different discussions and avenues. I think that it is, when I sit back and reflect on the last couple of series, this is the one that actually has a lot more time involved in doing and analyzing and providing the data and into, really looking at things. And even it's kind of interesting when you think about planning and forecasting. A lot of that stuff is it's hard, right? So there's a lot of, assumptions, and you're basing off of expectations and views and investments and managing all those things can feel this kind of the same way. But yet it is one of the most critical things that you do take the proper time to analyze and to look at so that, kind of, where the business is headed and how to speak to those investors and to those bankers and to those things. And I think that what's interesting to me is that, a lot of times people think that level 1 is probably the more like hours in terms of doing processing, which is probably true in terms of transactional and getting, the information and compliance kind of buttoned up. But this 3rd level is quite the heart of a company that is trying to make big strategic investment decisions, debt decisions, all those various different things and that presentation. So that's kind of what my initial reaction is.
Well, thank you both for your feedback as always. I'm looking to improve this series, what I have to say about it, and appreciate your feedback here on the panel. And for our viewers on YouTube or our listeners on the podcast, we'd love to hear your feedback as well. If you have any, throw it in the comments. I think, looking to improve this content and address things that maybe aren't as obvious to you all that maybe are obvious to us on the panel. Well, with that, I will kick this podcast episode back over to Charlie.
All right, so I've got one we can talk about from Accounting Today that I thought was pretty interesting. It's called KPMG opens collaboration hub in the metaverse. And so what's going on is that KPMG, of course, is a large accounting firm. It has a US arm and a Canadian arm. And basically they've debuted this new, this collaboration hub, that is what they're calling it. in the metaverse where people can put on VR headsets and then talk to each other in a virtual office space. In fact, I'm going to use the quote from the article because I think it does a good job summarizing it. The firm envisions a virtual office space where avatars will be able to interact in meetings and training sessions, and showcased an animated YouTube video demonstrating how it will look with whiteboards, roundtables, conference rooms, and other gathering places. They've debuted a couple of other things along with it, a software they're calling Chain Fusion that helps them with audits and financial services, and it's going to collaborate with it. They said it's also kind of a behavioral change there, because what they're going to do is set up teams that are geared at helping the firm find ways that they can use this new technology to increase collaboration. And so, on the one hand, as with the last article, it all seems very futuristic and kind of strange. But at the same time, the way that we communicate with each other has changed quite a bit, even in our lives. And so I kind of asked myself, is this over the top? Is this too much? Or is this maybe ahead of its time and might actually be the way that we communicate in the not so distant future? What do you guys think?
So I feel like I am like an older version who's like not embracing the change of technology really well, because I hear you, in the article just about, I just don't get it. Like, why do you need to meet in the metaverse and kind of restructure this? And if this is how we're going to conduct future meetings, I mean, isn't the, Zoom call or whatever type of video conferencing call you have, isn't that enough? Or is it meeting in person enough, or calling them on the phone? But then I say that and I'm like, oh my gosh, do I sound like one of those people who just can't embrace the change of the time? But I'm just struggling with the thought of, is this where, how people will be meeting in the future? And if there's a real true need and want for this, it blows my mind on that. And I think that the other part that kind of makes me think about it is that the cost to support that infrastructure in the meta space, I would assume, or metaverse, I think that would be expensive to do. So I'm a little bit slow maybe to adapt to this. Granted, I can be slow. It took me forever to get one of those flashy iPhones back in the day. But yeah, I guess I'm not quite sure if this is the path that I envision us going down or want us to go down. What about you, Ty?
I mean, I actually think it is a good idea, in the sense of, I think, between the three things that you cited, meeting in person, Zoom, or meeting in the metaverse. I mean, I don't think of it as a good idea in terms of replacing meeting in person, but I think that it could be a better form of meeting than Zoom at some point. I don't know that the technology is there today. I haven't checked out Meta yet myself, so I haven't been in there and kind of seen what it's like and what this would be like. So I suspect it's not necessarily as good of an experience as us talking together on Zoom and sharing our screens and stuff is right now. But I can see where it could be as good or better in terms of a virtual interaction. Because I think, when you think about what we're doing over Zoom right now, this is kind of like a virtual interaction. It's a remote interaction, I guess. It's not a virtual interaction. And so, as a replacement for remote interactions, I think the metaverse could be that. But I don't see it as a replacement for in-person interactions necessarily. I was thinking about this the other day, like if I were to go into the metaverse and then work on a spreadsheet, would I be working on a spreadsheet on a computer that I'm looking at in the metaverse? And and then isn't the phrase for that isn't that a meta thing to do? And then on top of that, I was also considering, how much computing power would that take? Like, if I had a complicated spreadsheet that I was looking at in a computer in the metaverse, would my computer be able to handle that? Sometimes my computer freezes on just the spreadsheet. So having my computer have to work through that spreadsheet, viewing it in the metaverse, I don't know. But I was intrigued by that idea, because I like having lots of like big screens. And so I was like, well, in terms of office footprint and real estate, if I could just like stick my goggles on and then get as big of a screen as I want for my spreadsheet, might be pretty awesome, actually.
See, I think that's it. It's difficult to find a good application of this technology, but I think they exist. I think that's a good one, having a never-ending screen that you can just look through. Another one would be like if you're looking, let's say a team is considering getting a space for some purpose and they want to visually kind of view that space and how it's set up. If you can get the metaverse to basically mock place and then have people giving feedback on the setup, I could see that being hard to simulate in a Zoom or something like that. But I think the use cases for that seem pretty few and far between, and probably not for KPMG, who's the ones who's talking about using this, because yeah, like you said, it's all spreadsheets for them. So yeah. All right, I think you have another article we can talk about. Is that right, Tammy?
I do. Speaking about a workspace kind of environment and setting, Accounting Today also shared a link to a survey that is currently being conducted by Convergence Coaching titled Anytime, Anywhere Work Survey. The survey has been conducted since 2014, and it is focused on measuring the adoption of remote and flexible work practices at accounting firms. As we can imagine, there has been an evolution on attitudes towards working from home over the past few years. And with that fact, or with the fact that most of the accounting professionals have been working from home during the pandemic, the results of this year's surveys is expected to be really interesting in seeing how firms are addressing the future working remote and maybe this metaverse, but also even more so how they plan on going back into the office setting as well. So note that the survey will close on July 15th, and the results are expected to arrive in September. So we will be sure to share those results with you when they come out. But the article did share an interesting result from the 2020 survey. In response to the question, most cited challenges in shifting to remote work, managing teams was rated the highest of the challenge, followed by not being fully paperless, communication, tech and IT support, and clients not being ready for remote work. So while we wait for the 2021 results, I thought it'd be fun to kind of speculate if we think that there are going to be changes to this metric in terms of working remotely and the challenges there, but also if we could talk about what the difficulties of shifting back into in-office work is going to look like.
Yeah, I think we're all kind of learning the hard way on terms of, getting back into the office in some way for a lot of us. And I think that, yeah, these are going to keep evolving, but I think companies are doing the best they can with what they have to, try to find a good working compromise that lets people have that flexibility and freedom of working at home, but still get some of those benefits of meeting in the office now and again. And so, yeah, I think it's a tricky thing because it's such a different answer for each firm and what they're doing and what their environment is. But that's one of those challenges that we're all continuing to kind of struggle with and grasp at. What do you think, Ty?
Yeah, I think that I think the piece that hasn't been well hasn't been well established or well solved for is that I think as human beings, there's a lot of there's the ancillary pieces of what it means to go to work. Like, you go in, you sit in an office, there's certain routines, certain things that happen that make you feel like it's real. I think that's we were just talking about the metaverse. I think that's the problem with at-home work for a lot of people is that it plays a cognitive trick on a lot of people and makes them feel like what they did during the day wasn't real, that they weren't really necessarily working. And, or for some people, maybe doesn't make them the level of their game is not at the same level, so to speak, because deep down subconsciously they don't really believe that they're at work. They don't really believe that they're engaging in work when they're in an environment that is not is not normal to them for work. I think that's, and I don't know, and I think that issue probably would change with time. And so that would be curious if, 2 years into this, if that has changed for people. I say this thinking that I myself and some other people like me, and it might be true for you too as well, are kind of outliers on that issue to some extent, because even before the pandemic, work was my life in a lot of ways, right? So there wasn't a lot of division between my work and my life for most of my career anyway. And so, I was used to working at home. Before and after hours, I would be in the office. I was used to not always being in the office anyway. At TCA, we didn't have an office per se that people were required to go into. People were work from home or work from their clients anyway to begin with. So I already overcame that kind of psychology, but I do think we're outliers in that regard. I think that your average American worker, there are certain routines and things and visuals and ceremonial kinds of activities that occur that set them up psychologically for bringing their full game to, okay, I'm working now. And I think that being at home, those things went away. And I think that while people tried to work from home, they probably didn't always bring their full game, because even if they thought they were, they wanted to, because of that psychological impact. And I think that's the intuition that you hear from some CEOs. Like, we always like to talk about Elon Musk, and that was one of the things he did in the last couple of weeks, right? Was say that his team had to come back, Tesla team had to come back to the office, kind of thing. And I think that's the intuition with that, is why do some CEOs, feel the need to require people to come into the office? There's varying reasons that could be, but I would speculate that one reason is this intuition that some leaders have in their gut about what I'm saying, about the fact that a lot of the average American worker doesn't their psychology is not set up to bring their full I'm at work game when they don't have that normal environment that triggers them to say I'm at work or think that they're at work. So I don't know if I described my thoughts on that well, but yeah, that's my rambling on it.
I think I understand what you're saying, though. So you think that in this year's results, the challenges that people are going to face in terms of what's working from home, but what the challenges are, it's really going to be that psychological kind of thought processes. Are they doing their best work from home? Are they, do they need to be in the office? Kind of like that inner kind of dialogue could be the challenge to that. Because I think a lot of the technology, because if you looked at the 2021 results, a lot of it, or the 2020 results, sorry, a lot of it was really focused on like how to communicate, how to work with teams, the infrastructure. I think that kind of has all been ironed out in the last couple of years since we've been, everyone was working from home. So now it really is the difference of those who really do prefer working in office setting. I think what we're going to see on top of their list is that fact of I want to be in the office. Like working from home is just not as beneficial to me in that sense. And to your point, there are, like Elon Musk and certain other leadership folks who they believe that they can't work from home, or people can't work from home. So it's just better to have them in the office and that they're going to do their best work there. So I think there's going to be a lot more in terms of that in the results. But I also think that in terms of there's going to be a new challenge of going back into the office, because a lot of companies actually started hiring in different states because everyone was working from home. And so, they expanded the talent pool by hiring folks in other states. And now if you're a company who's saying, well, now you're going to have to come back home, that's going to be a big challenge about returning back to the office. And not even just that, but there's also, we talked about this, I think in the last episode, but there are maybe a couple episodes ago, but there's a challenge of the infrastructure. If you're a person who's working in an office, but you have a desktop, for example, versus a laptop, you can't, go back and forth, from home to the office and have that hybrid style. So there's logistic stuff that needs to be ironed out as well. So it will be interesting to see how this kind of situation works, or what the survey results are in terms of what comes back and what's the feedback. Because I think, especially accounting firms are, and this probably impacts a lot of other companies that have the ability to work remotely, is how are they going to implement either the hybrid model, coming back in person, or staying strictly remote in the future, because it's interesting to see how that's all going to play out, and how employees are going to feel about it now that they have done it for a couple of years. So I don't know, more to come on that, but I am curious to see if we're going to find that most accounting firms or service firms will be kind of going back into the traditional in-office setting, or maybe not.
I don't think so, because my observation anecdotally is I think that small businesses are actually leading the way from a progressive standpoint on this compared to large companies. And what I mean by that, because I think what they saw was the opportunity for cost savings, right? That they didn't have to have as much office space, they could, and so they're quick to take advantage of that. I think the large companies who are maintaining large, expensive office spaces and, trying to require people to come back into the office almost as a social experiment to see, if having people in the office, has some kind of marginal impact on productivity, right? Because that's really, it's a theoretical proposition that, maybe people, like I was talking about earlier, maybe people are more productive, or maybe the quality and value of people's work is slightly higher, and at scale, if you're a large company with a lot of people, but that's what it feels like to me, is that large companies just conducting social experiments as opposed to just doing what's pragmatic. I think small businesses tend to do what's pragmatic. And anecdotally, the small businesses that I know, their pragmatic answer is, oh, I guess this kind of works and we don't have to pay for an office anymore. So let's not do that, right? And I think that's been the pragmatic answer from a lot of businesses. So yeah, we'll see. I think it will take some unwinding back the other direction, because, a lot, like I said, anecdotally, from what I've seen, a lot of small businesses would have to actually upsize their offices in order to bring everyone back. And so, but, there'll be a lot of years to come to see how this kind of all plays out.
I'm actually really glad you said that, because this kind of brings me to my last point I want to share on this topic, which is that just like those small businesses are going to have to unravel things, undo it. I personally know people who, when they were told that they could work remotely, they made life choices around that decision. And if they were to be told, and by the way, some of those included like moving to other countries. So if they were to be told to like go ahead and just come back in, granted that was their decision to do, but it's not like an undoable or easily undoable decision. And I think probably one of the worst things that you can do as an employer is to not be on the same page with those people, because whether you like it or not, those people are making life plans around that. And so I think that's just one of those things that gets overlooked, by Elon Musk, who just goes, everybody has to be at work. Bye. And, so I'm just thinking out loud there.
But he's Elon, he can do that. He doesn't care.
We'll see if he pays for it in the stock price.
Well, it's interesting that it comes at the same time that he's doing like a reduction in workforce, and so he knows. It seems like he's pretty good at timing. Like, it's like you all have to be in the office. Oh, and if you want to complain about that, by the way, we're doing a reduction in workforce.
And by the way, they're still pending the whole Twitter purchase. I mean, he has like 4 different news topics on just his name alone this last couple of weeks on those different kind of categories, and he has another issue with the satellite company as well. So there's a whole bunch of things that are happening on. He's going to probably, he times things well to distract from what's going on over here with this much better thing over here.
Well, and he's out there saying that the Tesla factories are like big money furnaces and stuff. So I think he's reverse pump and dumping the stock, and until somebody stops him, it'll just keep happening. Yeah, so that's all we've got for today. Thanks for watching the None of Our Businesses YouTube show and podcast. Tune in again next week for more business updates from an accountant's perspective. And please check out our sister podcast, Profitless on Purpose, where they're talking anything and everything in the nonprofit space. Thank you.
Bye.